Refusing to Forget is an award-winning public history project that works to increase general awareness of the history of state-sanctioned racial violence in the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. Between 1910 and 1920, ethnic Mexicans living on the Texas-Mexico border were targets of such violence. They were most often killed by the Texas Rangers, county law enforcement, and U.S. soldiers. Although historians estimate that over 1,000 ethnic Mexicans were killed, this chapter in Texas history has received scant public attention.
We have pursued a multifaceted public history project in an effort to ensure that these atrocities are remembered and discussed as part of the American historical inheritance. This includes a large exhibit at the Bullock State History Museum of Texas, the approval and erection of 4 historical markers that describe the violence and efforts to resist it, and public programming and memorialization events centered on some of the key sites and anniversaries of this tragic history.
Professors John Moran Gonzalez, Sonia Hernandez, Benjamin Johnson, Monica Munoz Martinez, Trinidad Gonzalez, and Christopher Carbona collaborate to bring public awareness to the long history of anti-Mexican violence in Texas and the long struggle for justice and civil rights along the U.S.-Mexico border. Despite numerous publications, this history continued to be forgotten, or worse, celebrated in public history and popular culture. Working with cultural institutions, teachers, journalists, and descendants of racist violence, we have designed public history projects that provide truthful accountings of the past, foster urgent public dialogue, and provide opportunities for healing and repair.
Over 90 years ago, a border native and the only Mexican American serving in the state legislature, Jose Tomas Canales, called for an investigation into state-sanctioned violence unleashed on the predominantly Mexican origin community in the state's southern border with Tamaulipas and Nuevo León. The 1919 Canales investigation into Texas Ranger violence and its civil rights legacy finally was publicly recognized in the spring of 2019. With the support from the National Endowment for the Humanities and numerous other entities, Refusing to Forget organized a conference to mark the centennial of the Canales investigation. The call for an investigation by this Brownsville attorney and member of the Tejano elite was prompted by the widespread killing of Mexican Americans and Mexican nationals working and residing in South Texas during the 1910-1920 period. Harper's Weekly reported that the killing of these ethnic Mexicans made it seem as, quote, if it were open gun season on Mexicans, end of quote. Using the pretext of a potential foreign invasion of revolutionary bandits, law enforcement and common residents alike took matters into their own hands, resulting in the indiscriminate killing of thousands. The conference, Reverberations of Memory, Violence, and History, the centennial of the 1919 Canales investigation, placed this traumatic event in the nation's history at the center of a public conversation. This public conversation, in expanded form, is featured in a scholarly anthology entitled Reverberations of Racial Violence, Critical Reflections on the History of the Border, published by UT Austin Press in 2021. This research has begun to shift the public conversation about the way in which we study violence and civil rights, about community resilience, and about our state's role in encouraging violence.
At every public history event, we are asked, when will this history be taught in public schools? Refusing to Forget members have made presentations to teachers, provided oral history workshops for students, developed educational videos, created a lesson plan on the life of Jovita Haydar, and collaborated with teachers. Mr. Juan Carmona in Donna, Texas, and his students helped recover lost primary sources and have made research presentations at important commemorative events. But this history should be available and taught to all students in Texas.
The importance of continuing this work is vital for future generations and those descendants of violence to know what happened here, to know that our history is a vital part of U.S. history. For the past 100 years, most of this history has been whispered and told from generation to generation so that they will remember. But over time, these stories have started to fade, and the best way to keep this history alive is to record it for all posterity. The work of Refusing to Forget is not just about recording the events of the past, but to help in the healing of those affected by the violence of the Texas Rangers and those agencies which took so much in the name of American progress.
They say this is a forgotten history. But for those of us who are descendants, like myself, we learned this history from our parents, from our grandparents. We learned about how our ancestors were shot and killed, and left out to rot. This is a history that should not be forgotten. That's why we refuse to forget. It's time for the state of Texas to confront this history in a truthful manner so that we can have a reconciliation for all of us.
This work is possible thanks to the generations of witnesses and survivors who refused to be intimidated, who left personal records documenting racial terror, who shared their stories with their children, and those who passed memories from one generation to the next. They helped make sure that the names of victims like Antonio Rodriguez, Antonio Longoria, Jesus Bazan, Concepcion Garcia, Longino Flores, and Paulina Cerda would not be forgotten. They call on all of us to refuse to forget and to call out racial injustice in all its forms today.